Hello Guardians, and welcome to Trio Root of Nightmares for Beginners. The goal of this guide is to help anyone, even those new to Root of Nightmares, understand the strategies, loadouts, and ideas behind successfully completing this raid with just 3 people. I found this trio to be quite beginner friendly. The mechanics are simple, and the encounters become a breeze once you get the hang of them. For the most part, you run this raid the same as with the full fire team, but you just have to be faster and more precise with your actions. In terms of difficulty, I would rank this as slightly harder than Trio Vault of Glass. Speaking of which, I have a Trio Vault of Glass guide linked in the description. That video had a ton of great feedback in the comments and did way better than I ever could have imagined, so a very big thank you to anyone who watched that video. Regardless, you don't have to have completed Trio Vault of Glass first, I just personally found it a little bit easier. Anyways, just like with Trio Vogue, my raid group is not made of people with stupid amounts of clears. My teammate Fiery and I raid fairly often, but I more or less taught my other teammate Tazvirus how to do Ron as we were trioing it. Safe to say, prior experience in Ron definitely helps, but it is certainly not mandatory. I know that people have a variety of knowledge coming into this guide, so I tried to include a broad overview for each encounter, then a more in-depth look at each mechanic in case you've never done it before. I also included timestamps throughout the video, so feel free to skip around. My loadouts are at the very end of this video, so if you are ever curious about what perks, mods, fragments, or anything else I'm using, that's where you should check. One more thing. This guide is specifically made for Season of the Wish, however, really all the information in this guide should carry on into the future. The only thing that really you should change is damage strategies, in which case I would just look up Trio Flawless Root of Nightmare runs for whatever season you're currently watching in, and just simply copy their loadouts. In any case, my name is Logan, and if you want to learn how to Trio Root of Nightmares, I really hope this guide can help you out. Let's get into it. Cataclysm is the first encounter in Ron, and it is by far the easiest. For those of you who know how this encounter works, this encounter is run identically. You could have 2 runners, but we found it easier to have 1 runner and 2 ad clears. I am only going to cover how to run with 1 runner in this video, however, once you understand how to run with 1 person, adding another runner becomes very simple. The only real mechanic ad clears need to worry about is killing the 2 Scions to spawn a Tormentor, then killing the Tormentor when Sleeping Terror is about to run out. In case you didn't know, Sleeping Terror is the timer on the left side of your screen, and when it reaches 0, your team wipes. Killing a Tormentor adds 30 seconds to your timer, which is why they are so valuable to kill at the right time. There are also barrier champions that spawn opposite the Tormentor, so make sure to have an anti-barrier weapon on. These ad clears can run whatever they are comfortable with, but I highly recommend a machine gun as it can absolutely melt the Tormentors. Forerunner is also insanely underrated when it comes to dealing with the Tormentors. If you shoot the arms, about 2 to 3 shots will take off a third of his health, which becomes very useful. If you have a Forerunner, I definitely pair that with a machine gun, but it's by no means mandatory. The runner, on the other hand, must go as fast as they can to create every node. There is a pattern to running, but at a baseline level, just know that you have to shoot the node with the big glowing aura around it, then shoot the coalescing ball at a different plate. You have to shoot this coalescing ball within 20 seconds, or else your timer will run out and you have to shoot the glowing node again. Additionally, if anyone hits the glowing node during these 20 seconds, every node will be deactivated and you'll more than likely wipe. Make sure that nobody is accidentally hitting the nodes, because that will be very bad. If you choose to do the pattern method, which I highly recommend, it's much faster and it makes it much easier, so I highly recommend taking the time to learn it. So to explain how to run specifically, I'm going to use this graphic made by Pryne, hope I pronounced that right, 2536. So as you can see, this encounter is made up of 4 different sections. And so if you see these glowing rings I made, you have to activate all the nodes in each group in order to move on to the next group. So for example, this is group 1. They're going to go from front to back. So you have to activate both nodes in group 1 for any of the nodes in group 2 to spawn, all 3 nodes in group 2 for all the nodes in group 3 to spawn, and all the in group 3 for the end to spawn. Obviously, this is the 4th section, so you'd have to activate all the nodes in section 1 to move on to section 2, and then all of these to move on to section 3, and then once you hit this ending one for 3rd, you'd move on to the 4th area. But I'm just going to use the 4th area just because it's the most spread out and it will be the least messy. So this pattern really only has 2 parts. The first 2 nodes are part 1, and every other node after that is part 2, which makes it pretty easy. Essentially, for the first 2 nodes, you're just going to run to whatever one has a coalescing ball. Remember, it's randomized in each group, so it could be 1 could have the first ball, then 2 could have the second, or plate 2 could have the first ball and 1 could have the second. It's random. And so say the first ball is in group 2. And mark that with a 1. So we'd shoot the starting node, we'd run to plate 2, and then we'd shoot this ball and run back. Now, since we've shot the only other node in group 2, that means group 1 has to be the next one. Or, sorry, node 1 has to be the next one that the ball appears at. So after we're at the start, we'd shoot this again, and then we'd run to plate 1, and then we'd shoot this ball, and then return. Put 2 next to that. Now, since we beat this first group, now any of the 3 nodes in the second group may have a ball on them. It's randomized between these 3 and only these 3. So, say the third ball is right here. We'd run from start to this third node, shoot it, but instead of returning to the starting node like we did the first 2, this is the second half of the pattern, you return to the node 2 prior to the one you just shot. So, the prior one is this one, and 2 prior is this one. So we'd, instead of returning to start, we return to plate 2, which is the first one we shot. Then a node will appear somewhere else, so say it's at 3. We'd run from plate 2 to plate 3, and then after we shoot this one, we'd go to, once again, the 1, 2 prior. So 1, 2, which means the glowing node is at plate 1. Because this is the second one we activated, and this is the fourth one we activated. 4 minus 2 is 2. So you'd run back to plate 2, and now since we've activated both plate 4 and plate 3, it has to be plate 5 that has the ball on it, because you have to complete every node in a section, or every node in a group to move on to the next group. So we'd run from plate 1 to plate 5, and 5 minus 2 is 3, so we'd go to the third node we activated. So we'd go over here, and then we'd take it forward to the next group, which has to be 6, which is right here, and then we'd go back 2 more. 6 minus 2 is 4, so we'd go to plate 4. And then we take it from forward to the end, and that's how you beat a section. After you beat all 4 sections, that's the whole encounter. Keep in mind that the Sweeping Terror debuff on the left side of your screen, if that gets down to 0, you wipe. And also, when you kill a Tormentor, you get 30 seconds added to this timer. So what you can do is you can actually keep the Tormentor alive if you're going to finish in time, and save it for the when you get the Sweeping Terror buff, because when you complete a section, the Sweeping Terror buff resets and goes away for a minute. But basically, if you can save the Tormentor and keep it alive, you can shoot it as soon as the starting nodes, as soon as they activate, and then you can just start with an extra 30 seconds to your running, which is very useful. And so this first section is very possible to have to complete before the Sweeping Terror time runs out. So you can actually just save your Tormentor for the second section. And then also make sure you kill the Science to spawn the Tormentor before you end the section, or else they will not spawn after you end the section. One quick tip when you're using Eager Edge, make sure to look up to the sky whenever you are about to swing, because looking up into the air will get rid of some of the tracking, so you're less likely to fly at an enemy. This is really useful because, obviously, if you're going towards an enemy, you're not going where you want to go, and so just simply looking up, even if it's not all the way up, just for half a second when you're about to swing, that can get rid of a lot of the tracking and make your Eager Edging way more consistent. Really, just make sure the runner is going as fast as possible to reach the nodes, and make sure the ad clears are killing Tormentors at the right time, and with enough practice, you can definitely get this encounter. Next up is Scission, the second encounter in Root of Nightmares. This encounter has 3 floors, all of which are very similar. Once you get one floor completed, you more or less can do all of them. Whereas you may have only had one person run during the first encounter, I highly recommend having 2 runners for this encounter. People have soloed Ron, and it is very possible to only have 1 runner, but you have 3 people, so you might as well use them. The main thing to note for this encounter is that there are now 2 types of nodes, light nodes and dark nodes, and they act independently of each other. There are many strategies for running, but there are really only 2 main methods that I've seen. The first and easier method has each person do only one type of node, so one player will complete all the light nodes and the second player will complete all of the dark nodes. At the most basic level, the runner will activate the node across the gap, activate the node on their home side, then repeat, refreshing their buff between each activation. The node with the aura will also always be on your starting side. This method is much better if you have 2 runners who work at different paces or need to take time to clear ads. Just like first encounter, I'm going to use a map by Pryny2536 in order to show you the exact pattern to running. So, as you can see, there are 3 floors, 1, 2, 3, but they're all very similar. Once you get one, you get all of them. It's just a matter of endurance. Essentially, the whole pattern you're going to do is just cross, then progress. So if you're starting, you start at the plate labeled 1 on this map, and then the light player, for example, would cross and activate this node, then return. they would then progress it 1. So when I say progress, I mean move it forwards 1 on your home side. And then they'd return. And then they do the same thing. So I'll use a different color. They now go to plate 4, but instead of returning to plate 1, it's a little unlike the first encounter. You're not going to go 2 back, you're just going to go to the most recent one you activated on the home side. So whenever you activate one of these nodes, it will go back to the most recent one on the home side. So when we activated this one, the most recent one on the home side was 1, so we returned to 1. When we activated 4, the most recent one we shot on the right side was 3, so we would return to plate 3. This same exact pattern, you'd go, when you're back to plate 3, you'd progress it forwards 1, and then you take it back across 1 more time, and you're done. Same thing for dark, you just cross, return, progress, return, cross, go back to plate 3, progress it 1, return, and cross 1 more time. After both players activate their 6th nodes, a wave of adds will spawn, and once you kill these adds, you can move up to the 2nd floor. Additionally, once you shoot the 6th node, the timer will go away, and you can shoot the buff as many times as you want without deactivating the nodes. These nodes also have a set rotation, so it will always be this node first, always be this node second, always be this node third, and so on and so on, so you always know exactly where you need to go. Also keep in mind that when you're about to progress it forwards for the final time, so when you're going from this plate and trying to progress it here, or this plate and trying to progress it here, a barrier will spawn out of the very back, so make sure you have an anti-barrier weapon to easily destroy them. In Season of the Wish, I found that Indebted Kindness, the special sidearm from Warlord's Ruin, is really nice against these. Just shoot like most of a mag and they'll die, and it also stuns them, but just use anything anti-barrier. But if you're not careful, these barrier champions can become a problem, so just be careful of that. So with the first method I showed you, used a cross-progress strategy. This tactic is a cross, progress, cross, but you'll be switching which type you're doing in between. So essentially, it's going to start just like the first method. So light player is going to activate their first coalescing ball. Dark player is going to activate their first coalescing ball. And then once both are active, and only once both the balls have been shot, you can shoot the other person's starting node. So light would go to the orange starting node, and dark would go to the light starting node. So why is it important for you to activate these first? Well, if you remember from first encounter, if you shoot the coalescing ball, it will let you shoot the node again. However, if you shoot the glowing node before you activate the coalescing ball, you will deactivate all the nodes of that type. So you have to make sure that you activate the ball before you shoot that type. So activate dark to be able to activate dark, activate light to be able to activate light again. So from here, all you're going to do is progress that colors forwards. So light would cross, activate the dark node, and progress forwards 1. Then they would return, shoot this node again, and cross. Dark, on the other hand, would, after they shoot their first ball and hit light again, they would move light forwards 1, and then they would return and move it forwards. This is the whole strategy, it's just repeating. And so, for example, from here, the dark player, once this node and this node have been shot, would go to 3, and then move it forwards 1, and then go back here and cross, and that's it. The light player would go back to here, move it forwards 1, and then cross. Obviously, shooting the glowing node in the middle. But basically, you're going to cross, switch which type you're doing, progress, cross, repeat. If you do it this way, it takes more timing and you have to be way more careful of when you hit the nodes, but if you can do this method is way faster, but it's a higher risk, high reward scenario. Also, if you're looking at the background footage, I'm well skating across the whole thing. Well skating and shatter skating, if you know how to do that, is really useful for this encounter. However, you don't have to do it. It just makes it way easier. But if you're going to use the lifts to cross, make sure that you, if you're a warlock, or really on any class, jump at the apex of your jump. So when you still have an upward velocity, activate your jump and you should easily make it. At least I found that to be way more consistent instead of activating it when you're starting to go down. Once again, either way is possible, but if you can wall skate or shadow skate, it makes this encounter way more fun and way faster. Also, just like last encounter, make sure you're looking up into the air whenever you eager edge, and your tracking will be less likely to track the enemies, which is pretty important, especially if you're trying to wall skate or shadow skate across the edge. The third player, who's not running, can just stay on ad clear. I would recommend they take out all the barrier champions and try and just make sure that the whole area is as clear as possible so the runners have an easy time. There's not a specific loadout that you need to run for this encounter, but I highly recommend a really strong ad clear build such as Sun Bracers, or Bannervore Titan for survivability, or Assassin's Cowl Arc Hunter, or really anything that you can just stay alive and clear ads with. Explicator is the third encounter, and it is by far the most unique. This is run the same way as with 6 people, but you'll just have 2 people transferring planets and 1 person ad clearing. It is possible to have 1 runner solo the lower level and the second runner solo the top level, but this is harder and I don't recommend it unless you are very confident in your ability to switch planets. It is far easier to have these 2 people switch the bottom planets first, then switch the top planets. In case you are not familiar with how this encounter works, here's a quick rundown. The left side of the map is the light side, and the right side is the dark side. You are trying to get 3 of the same color on 1 plate. Both sections on the light side will start with 2 light planets and 1 dark, and both sections on the right side will start with 2 dark planets and 1 light. You essentially just have to flip the light planet on the right and the dark planet on the left with each other. To do this, you simply kill a Colossus to see the color of the planets above you. Call out which planet is the odd one out for your side, and interact with the glowing orb beneath it. Then you will go and bank at the glowing orb under the planet the other player just called out. The ad clearer's job is much easier. Simply kill all the ads as fast as you can, especially the Centurions and the Phalanxes. The Centurions are required to be killed for the Colossuses to spawn, and the Colossuses need to be killed by the mechanic users, that way they can see the colors of the planet. I highly recommend Sun Bracers on Warlock, especially with Icarus Dash, so you can make sure you don't get blown off the edge by the boss, and you also have insane ad clear. Make sure if you're using Sun Bracers to always have Restoration times 2 up. Really though, you can just run whatever ad clear build you're the most comfortable with. Just make sure that you can stay alive and kill all the ads as fast as possible. I also recommend having like a slug shotgun or a fusion or something just to take out the Colossus on this side that the mechanic users are not doing. So if they're on bottom, kill the Colossus on top for them. If they're on the top, kill the Colossus on the bottom for them. And the only other thing you have to really worry about is the little node in the center of the room, and as soon as both players switch their planets, shoot this to start the next round of spawns early. This will give you more time and therefore more leeway for switching the planets. It's not absolutely essential, but it can definitely help. Regardless, just keep killing the ads until you see the index planets reveal themselves in the chat. This means that after the Centurions die in middle, another set of Colossi will spawn, but instead of looking at your plate, you look at the middle to know what planets to switch. There should be 2 planets of one color and 1 of the other, and have the right player grab any planet on their side and bank under 1 of the dark planets. Have the left player do the same and grab any planet on their side, then bank under 1 of the light planets. Then finally have the ad clear grab whatever planet is left. So if there's 2 dark and 1 light, have the ad clear grab the second dark. If there's 2 light and 1 dark, have the ad clear bank the second light. After all 3 planets are banked, damage will start, and you'll just go from the plate with the most common color to a plate with the odd color out to a plate with the most common color again. Here's a quick example using a graphic by Pryny again. So, left side is the light and dark side is the right. So once again, left side will start with 2 light planets. I'll just circle them in blue. These are random every time, so any one of these 3 could be the odd one out. But let's say this one's the odd one out, and for right side, this one's the odd one out, and these 2 are dark. Essentially, the left side player would just interact with the odd one out and bank it at the right side's odd one out. And this player would interact with their odd one out and bank it at this odd one out. You're literally just switching the odd planets out, that way you have 3 dark planets on right and 3 light planets on the bottom. After both planets have been successfully swapped, you would just tell the ad clear that you both have banked, and they will shoot this little nut in the middle, that way they can accelerate the spawning and start the next wave. Just give you a little more leeway, and it can just give you a little extra time, which is nice. Then after this, you'll just do the same thing for the top. So say dark, actually let's do a different one. This one's dark, this one's light, this one's light, this one is light, this one's dark, this one's dark. Just like last time, this player, the left player would interact with this and bring it over to this player's odd one out, and the right player would interact and bring it to the left player's odd one out. And then after that, you'll go on to, it should say the index planets reveal themselves, in which case some Centurions will spawn up top, and after the ad clear kills those, one more set of Centurions will spawn at all the plates. And then all you'll do is you'll look at these middle 3 planets. 2 of them will be light and 1 will be dark, or 2 will be dark and 1 will be light. And then all you do is grab any of the dark planets, any of these, and bank it on wherever the dark planet is. So say this is a dark, this is a dark, and this is a light. The player who's doing the mechanic on the right side would just grab any of these planets and bank it on one of the plates. Ad clear would also grab a planet and bank it on one of these plates, and then the light player would just grab any of these planets and bank it on the light side. And after that, you should be on to damage. Another nice thing to know, damage order is always in the order of the most common color, the odd color out, the most common color. So in this case, since we have 2 dark and 1 light, it would be dark, light, dark. So you could start on left, then go to middle, then go to right, or you could start on right, then middle, then go to left. Also, if you have a well, I highly recommend placing it like right in the center of all the plates. That way you can go to a plate and then run straight into the well for damage, and then use that same well when you go to each of the different plates. It just makes it a little more convenient, and you only really need 1 well if you're doing it this way. I highly recommend using rockets for this encounter, but whatever damage strategy you are most confident with will work. I also personally use loadout switches to swap from a build with Sunbracers, Reserves, and Scavs to a loadout with Rain of Fire, Solar Surges, and Resists. This is not mandatory though, and you can do it just by staying on the same loadout. Also, if you have some good Ron armor, consider running mods like Focus Light, Focus Darkness, or Release Recover. Focus Darkness increases ability, damage, and mobility when you have Flux of Darkness. Focus Light gives you increased weapon damage and resilience when you have Field of Light, and Release Recover starts health regen when you lose Field of Light or Flux of Darkness. These can help give you a little extra damage boost if your team is struggling with damage, but is not mandatory. After you do damage at each plate, damage is over and you can start switching planets again. The only other thing to note is once you get to the final stand, all plates should be the same color so you can start anywhere. You only have a limited amount of time to kill him once you start final stand though, so make sure to throw everything you have at him. If you do everything correctly, then congrats. You can now move on to the final encounter. Honestly, once you can get switching down and can get some consistent damage, this encounter should hopefully become clockwork for you. The final encounter in Root of Nightmares is Nezarec. Just like every encounter in this raid, you run this encounter very similarly to how you would with 6 people. The only change is you only have 1 runner go left, 1 runner go right, and 1 gaze taker. The runners will run using the same method as they did first encounter, and since I already covered that there, I'm not going to cover that here. Their main task is just connecting the nodes as fast as possible and don't have to worry about much else until damage. The gaze taker, on the other hand, has multiple objectives they need to complete. First of all, they must shoot Nezarec's arms in order to see what refuge to grab. They then must shoot his chest to stop his hatred from knocking your team into the air. This spot on the left is very convenient to shoot his crits as you have cover and a good angle on him. My loadout for gaze taking was a Voidlock with Osteos Riga and a Clown cartridge Uzume. I proc Devour and killed ads until his crits appeared to extend Devour and create heavy, and then use my sniper to shoot the crits. After you shoot all 3 crits, you need to go create whatever refuge you saw when you shot his arms. The runners could create this refuge, but we found it easier to have the gaze taker do it as they had nothing to do after they shot his crit. To create a refuge, you must shoot a node with the opposite color's buff. For example, when you have Field of Light and shoot a dark node, you create a darkness refuge, and when you have Flux of Darkness and shoot a light node, you create a light refuge. Wait on the node with the glowing aura whose color is opposite of what appeared when you shot his arms. Then, when the runner for that side shoots the node, run over to the other side and shoot the already active node. This should create a refuge, and you must have the correct refuge buff to avoid Nezarec's wipe mechanic. All players must run through this node to get the refuge, and if it runs out before Nezarec does his wipe mechanic, you must refresh it. After that, just have runners continue connecting nodes. Make sure to take his gaze again before the second runner finishes their side. If both sides finish when Nezarec is on his podium, damage may start while he is above you and you'll miss out on a lot of potential damage. As soon as you take his hatred, the second runner can finish. Meet up with your team and get ready for damage. You'll know damage has started when Nezarec is blasted by a glowing beam. Unfortunately, sometimes this glitches and the graphic does not appear, in which case if you hear the damage music start, you can start damaging him. You can also look at the crystal in the middle on top of Nezarec's podium, and as soon as it pulses, get ready to start damage. My team tried to meet up at the ending light node for damage, and it worked well for us, but you can damage from wherever you want. Speaking of damage, I have seen many loadouts work. Many teams use rockets given their very high damage output. Many hunters on solo runs use Lucky Pants and Malfeasance. Grenade launchers can work well, and even Merciless can put in work. My team started out on rockets, but his teleports made our rockets miss and made them way more inconsistent than we liked. Because of this, my team personally ran heavy grenade launchers with 2 of us using Merciless. We use Regnant with Envious Assassin and Explosive Light, but if you have a Cataphract with Envious and Bait and Switch, that will work better. For Merciless, make sure to get a kill and reload to proc Impetus before you fire each mag. Without Impetus, Merciless isn't anywhere near as good. For damage, you'll definitely want a debuff. If you're playing in Season of the Wish, Solar abilities will give a 15% debuff to bosses, it's an artifact mod. Instead, I opted to use Felwinter's Helm and finish an enemy to apply a 30% debuff to Nezarec. Felwinter's Helm debuffs nearby enemies on a finisher kill, and Apotheosis gives rapid ability regen on Supercast. Despite Weaken only being a 15% debuff, you can extend the 30% debuff with Weaken, hence the Apotheosis for the constant weakening grenades. Like I said previously, I use loadout swaps for this and every other boss encounter, and I highly recommend you do too, but as always, you don't have to, but it made damage much easier for me. I could quickly swap from Osteo, a sniper, scavs, and reserves to Merciless and Surges, which made my damage much higher. Also, in case you didn't know, unlike swapping heavy weapons, swapping a special weapon to another in the same slot will not lose you any ammo. Additionally, if you are using an Envious Assassin grenade launcher, as well as loadouts, make sure your grenade launcher has backup mag on your pre-damaged build, then boss spec on your damaged build. Envious overflows based on mag size, so you can use backup mag to overflow more than normal. Switching to boss spec will not decrease the amount of shots in your magazine, and it lets you get the damage increase. Using this strategy, even with 2 very poor damage phases, we were nearly able to 2-phase Nezarec. If you can get him in a good position and deal some good damage, it is definitely possible to get an easy 2-phase. After damage, swap back to your original loadouts and rinse and repeat. Make sure to save some ammo for final stand, but if you can get the mechanics down and consistently do decent damage, this encounter is very realistic. And that's it! The end of Rito Nightmares. I hope this guide helps you understand the strategies behind 3-manning Ron, and if you do attempt it yourself, good luck! Also, quick side note, I really appreciate all the positive feedback on my Trio Vault of Glass video. I never expected it to get anywhere near as many views, comments, and likes, so if you did watch that video, thank you very much. Also, just like my Trio Vault of Glass video, any and all feedback would be greatly appreciated. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below and I'll make sure to respond. Since this is YouTube, I am also legally obligated to remind you to subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to see these trio guides as soon as I post them. I have a trio Deepstone guide planned and then hopefully a trio Garden of Salvation once I complete that. I'm also considering making a well skating guide for both controller and an M&K, so if you're interested in that, please let me know. Either way, I really appreciate it if you watched this far. If you do try to trio this raid, please let me know how it goes. Good luck, Guardians.